All right, today we're cracking open a particularly chilling case file from two of the most famous paranormal investigators of all time, Ed and Lorraine Warren. This is the story of the Donovan family haunting, a case they said wasn't just disturbing, but one of the absolute most dangerous they ever came across.
And isn't that just the perfect way to start this story? It all began in a house that, from the street, looked completely and totally ordinary. But as the Donovan family was about to find out, what was hiding inside their walls, well, it wasn't just a ghost. It was a full-blown nightmare.
So where does a story like this even begin? It starts with a really potent mix of loneliness and curiosity. It all kicked off with what seemed like, a harmless game, but it was actually a cry for connection that opened a door that should have stayed locked forever. The Donovans had just moved to a new town, and for their 19-year-old daughter Patty, it was rough. She had no friends, her parents were pretty strict, and she just felt this deep, suffocating loneliness. That new house didn't feel like a home at all. To her, it felt more like a prison. And when you're that isolated, you can make some fateful decisions. Looking for any kind of connection, Patty brought something into the house she thought might be fun, a Ouija board. She'd heard the stories that you could talk to spirits with it, and, well, her curiosity finally won. So there she is, alone in her room, hands on that little planchette. You can just imagine her heart pounding, right? A mix of fear and maybe a little bit of hope. And she asks her first question, just a quiet whisper out into the dark. And you know what? The response was immediate. The planchette just slid across the board, deliberately spelling out one single, bone-chilling word: yes. Something or someone was definitely listening. For the first time in what must have felt like forever, Patty didn't feel so alone anymore. She was thrilled, right? This spark of connection. So she pushed it a little further, asking the spirit for the one thing she wanted more than anything in the world. But see, whatever was on the other side of that board, it was smart. Wickedly smart. It knew exactly what she was vulnerable to. It didn't just offer friendship, oh no. It promised something way more enticing, claiming to be the spirit of a 19-year-old boy. And it wanted to be her boyfriend. For Patty, this felt like a dream come true. She really believed she had finally found a companion. And just like that, the game was over. Because what Patty had invited into her life wasn't some lonely teenage spirit, and the entire Donovan family was about to learn the horrifying truth of what was now living and getting stronger inside their own walls. And things went bad, fast. I mean, really fast. It started with these loud, unexplainable knocks coming from deep inside the walls every night. Then this disgusting smell, like a mix of sulfur and rotting meat, started filling the house. And then a thick red liquid that looked way too much like blood started pouring out of every single faucet. This was a terrifying, rapid descent into absolute chaos. Then came the night of March 31st, 1974. This is when the entity decided to show off its real power. The family just watched in total horror as a massive 100-kilo dresser lifted off the floor and started spinning violently in midair. Chairs, pictures, everything started floating around them as this dark, oily shadow just consumed the room. And then came the sound, this deep, inhuman growl that echoed through the entire house. So Ted Donovan does what any father would do. He grabs his family and they just run. They check into a hotel, but it was no use. The activity followed them. Flashing lights, disembodied screams. It got so bad they were kicked out. And when they finally came back home, they found it totally trashed. Cleaning fluids were dumped everywhere, and there were vulgar, obscene words scrawled all over the walls. There was just no escape. Trapped, terrified, and with nowhere else to go, the Donovans made one last desperate phone call for help. And that's when Ed and Lorraine Warren arrived, stepping right into a house that was already under siege by an incredibly powerful and evil force. Yeah, the Warrens didn't need much convincing. The second they walked through that door, they knew something was seriously wrong. The air itself felt heavy, almost suffocating. Ed, being the demonologist, knocked twice on a wall as a test, and 2 loud knocks answered right back from inside. Lorraine, the clairvoyant, immediately saw a huge black mass with glowing red eyes forming near Patty's room. And anytime they tried to pray, all hell broke loose. Candles would get blown out, and the knocking would get louder and more violent. Lorraine actually said the encounter was physically draining her. She said it felt like the entity was literally feeding off of her life force.
Now, for an investigator with her level of experience to say something like that was a huge red flag. They weren't just dealing with a ghost, this was something inhuman. And this led the Warrens to a really crucial diagnosis. This wasn't a normal haunting, where a spirit is tied to a house. This was what they called an infestation, a demonic, non-human entity that latches onto a person or a family. That's why running to the hotel did absolutely nothing. The evil wasn't in the house, it was attached to them, and it was going to follow them anywhere.
Lorraine looked at the family and said it point blank. Something this powerful doesn't just show up. It has to be invited in. Someone has to give it permission. And it was right then, totally overwhelmed with guilt and terror, that Patty just broke down. She confessed everything about the Ouija board and her so-called spirit boyfriend. The source of the entire nightmare was finally out in the open. Okay, so the secret's out. Now they know exactly what they're up against. And there was only one thing left to do. It was time to stop investigating and start fighting back. They got permission from the church to perform the rite of exorcism. The exorcism basically turned the house into a spiritual war zone. The second the priest started the ritual, the temperature in the room just plummeted to freezing. Then the entity showed itself, that same horrifying black shadow, but this time the whole family could see it. In this terrifying moment, the shadow just lunged forward and merged with Patty. Her eyes snapped open, glowing solid red. The final, violent battle had begun.
And as the prayers got louder and more intense, Patty started screaming in just pure agony. But it wasn't her voice. Her body actually levitated off the ground before it was violently thrown 5 feet across the room, slamming hard into a wall. And then she just collapsed to the floor, unconscious. And then, silence. In that deafening quiet that followed, everyone knew the battle was over. The entity was gone. But the whole ordeal left the family with a harrowing lesson they would never, ever forget. The second Patty hit the floor, it was over. Just like that. The heavy, oppressive feeling in the house just lifted. The foul smell was gone in an instant. The water from the taps finally ran clear. And when Patty woke up a little while later, she was completely herself again, with absolutely no memory of what had just happened to her. The infestation was finally over. The Donovan family made it through, but their story is a terrifying reminder of what can happen when deep loneliness crosses paths with a dangerous curiosity. And it leaves us all with one final, pretty haunting question. Are there some doors in this world that are meant to stay closed forever?